It was the summer of 1953, and the afternoons seemed longer then, as if the sun itself lingered over the fields for our sake. I was 12, and my mother's old house stood at the far end of a dirt road no one used unless they had reason. White paint peeled from its boards like the paper from an old letter, and the porch sagged under its own memories. When I think of it now, I remember the smell, first sun-warmed wood, cut grass, and the faint sweetness of lilacs that grew wild by the fence. Every day after dinner, I'd wander up to the attic window. The glass was warped, old enough that the edges blurred the world outside, and through it I would watch my neighbour, Miss Calhoun, tending her garden. She was a widow, ears sharp enough to hear a cricket start and stop, eyes faded but unwavering. She always wore the same blue shawl, even in the heat. When she noticed me there, she would lift one hand without smiling, the way you might greet someone at a graveside. It was in that window's quiet that I first heard it, the tapping. Soft, deliberate, like knuckles against wood. Too far away to be from the house itself, yet it seemed to come from within its bones. I mentioned it to Mother, and she told me attics creak. The heat makes them restless. But this was no creak. It came in 3 beats, always 3, followed by stillness. Sometimes I heard it at night while half dreaming, and I would imagine someone somewhere knocking, waiting for me to answer. Once, late in July, the tapping began while I was staring out at Miss Calhoun's garden. The rhythms were slower, spaced apart, as if the knocker had grown tired. That's when I saw her pause, her hands frozen in the soil. She turned toward my house, toward my attic window, though I was certain she couldn't see me through the glass. Her lips moved without sound. I leaned closer, and the tapping stopped. When I went to sleep that night, my dreams carried me not to the garden, but to the narrow hallway outside my old bedroom. There, in darkness deep enough to taste, I felt a presence standing just beyond reach, waiting. I woke with my heart beating fast and the faint smell of lilacs on the air, though their blossoms were long gone. As summer wore on, Miss Calhoun began visiting. She'd bring jars of preserves, always refusing to come inside. She told me once, in a voice meant to sound casual, that my house remembered too much. Some houses, she said, keep hold of people. You'll understand one day. I thought she meant photographs, or the way a floorboard carries the shape of a familiar tread. It was on the final evening before August took the last of the heat that I discovered the truth, or part of it. The sunset burned low, painting everything in copper and shadow. I climbed to the attic again, and the tapping began. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 3 again. I stood very still. The sound was coming from the far wall, the one we never used, behind a row of old trunks. Dust rose in thin clouds as I pulled them aside. There, set into the boards, was a small door I had never seen. Its paint was darker than the rest, and the brass knob was cold, despite the air's warmth. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I stood staring at it until the sun was gone, and the attic had turned to a black so complete I could no longer see my own hands. The knocks came once more, very softly, and stopped. I left without looking back. We moved before summer ended. Mother claimed we needed to be closer to town, but I knew it was because she had begun to avoid certain rooms, stepping carefully as if the house itself might wake. Years passed. I grew older, married, lost people dear to me. Yet every July, in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, I hear the 3 knocks in my mind, and smell lilacs blooming where there are none. Last winter, I visited that dirt road again. The house still stands, though the paint is almost gone, and the porch leans lower than I remember. I stood before it in the cold, and for the first time in decades, I saw Miss Calhoun, or someone wearing her blue shawl, standing among the dead garden stalks. She raised one hand. Just as before. Only then did I notice the attic window, open though no wind stirred. In its glass, warping the grey sky, I saw myself as I was at 12, leaning close, listening. And behind that boy, though I could not truly see it, something waited just beyond him, still knocking, still patient, still certain I would one day answer.